BlackRock, VanEck, Ripple, and Securitize, all partnering to tokenize the entire financial system. In this video, I want to talk about tokenization, exactly what it means. So many people see tokenization and hear how good it will be for the price of XRP, but no one talks about how it even impacts the price of XRP. What are the stall points for tokenization? Why haven't we seen more? And what is it going to do for the XRP ledger over the long run? How does it impact the price of XRP? In this video, that's exactly what we're going to be talking about. Guys, thank you to everyone who's shown support since I've been doing these videos a little bit more impromptu, doing some work on the office. Thank you to everyone who's smashing the like button and subscribing. It helps so much and can't wait to get back to the normal office. But in the meantime, thank you to everyone for all the support. It's been awesome to see all the kind words. I want to start off and jump right into it and do a brief history of the XRP ledger. And you're probably wondering why that matters, but the real reason I want to cover it is because so many people look at things like RLUSD or look at Ripple's priorities in terms of tokenization and looking at things like treasury bills and saying, oh, this is a pivot away from XRP. Guys, if you go back to the earliest attributes of the XRP ledger, right? The first things that were added to the XRP ledger because the creators of the XRP ledger thought these attributes would be so important to the future financial system. Those two first attributes were tokenization and a native DEX. The XRP ledger was the first blockchain out there to support tokenization. It was the first blockchain out there to also support a native DEX. These two things together are extremely powerful. And we're going to talk about exactly why they're so powerful together, but it's just really important to lay this foundation. RLUSD, tokenized treasuries, tokenized derivatives, these are not pivots by Ripple. This is why the XRP ledger was created. It was created to be an internet of value. But to be an internet of value, you can't just have XRP, right? XRP is liquidity. It's a decentralized clearinghouse. But in order to be a decentralized clearinghouse, in order for XRP to be the world's liquidity, there has to be assets on the chain to act as liquidity for. So none of these things are pivots from Ripple. In fact, it's the next stage to Ripple building out XRP ledger as the open source decentralized financial system for the entire world. This is something that I've stressed a lot on this channel. Ripple's goal to work with the traditional system rather than against it is a very powerful thing. And that's because the legacy financial system holds all the assets. They hold all the value. We're in this paradigm where there's this new system that doesn't have any value on it. And there's the old system that doesn't work, it's outdated, it's clunky, but it holds all the value, trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars. Ripple realized very early on they're not going to recreate the bond market, right? They might create new rails for the bond market, but they're not going to create all the new bonds. Those are all owned by the United States government. They're not going to create all the new real estate, right? Those are in all the REITs, and those are all in the investment funds. They're not going to create new private equity, right? That's just not going to happen. Those marketplaces are already established. And they're not going to create a new stock market, right? These things are already established in the legacy system. But Ripple realized very early on they don't need to do those things. They just need to present an opportunity to bring these assets into the new rails being built. So Ripple's idea is, hey, let's go build trust with these institutions. Let's go build partnerships so they can bring these assets on chain. This is not a pivot. This has always been part of Ripple's goal, and that's why the XRP ledger was created with native tokenization functionality. These assets are going to be issued on chain. The entire world is going digital. And as we heard from BlackRock, this is not going to happen on some private chain. This is not going to happen on Swift's new private blockchain. It's not going to happen on R3 Corda's private blockchain. There's no marketplace there. There's no appetite. In the same exact way a private version of the internet didn't win out, a private version of the internet of value isn't going to win out. It has to be public, it has to be open, it has to be neutral and decentralized. And that is what Ripple has been focusing with on the XRP ledger since day one. Now let's get into the more exciting stuff. How does this impact the price of XRP, right? Say we tokenize trillions and trillions of dollars of current financial assets on the XRP ledger. How does it impact the price of XRP? Now, this has been one of the biggest stall points that I see a lot of people really get wrong. And a lot of people totally misunderstand how XRP is going to work in this function. And it's not really their fault. It's because there's a lot of different use cases for XRP. People look at the way XRP is used in Ripple's payment platform and say, okay, well then how does tokenizing a whole bunch of assets on the XRP ledger do anything for XRP? Well, it actually goes to the function of how the XRP ledger works. As you have these tokenized assets, right? Tokenized currencies, things like RLUSD, Things like the Brazilian real, which I'm sure we will see a tokenized version of based off of Ripple's relationships in Brazil and based off of some betas already happening. Tokenized Japanese yuan. Tokenized treasury bills, we're already seeing those come online. Tokenized bonds, tokenized stocks, right? You have all these tokenized assets. But the problem is there's no direct liquidity between any of these assets. For example, if you wanted to go swap a Japanese bond for, let's just say, Tesla stock, right? There's not always liquidity between these two assets. In fact, building liquidity between all these different assets is very difficult because to find pairs for all these different things is infinitely large, right? The more assets you have, the more pairs you need. You need to create a pair between every two assets. So you would have to create a pair between that specific Japanese bond with every single currency, every single derivative, every single stock, and then you'd have to go to the next Japanese bond between every single currency, between every single stock, and then the next Japanese bond. And then you have to do that for the stock. You have to go between that stock and between every bond, and you can just see how this is some infinite, unachievable scale of liquidity where you have to create all these different pairs, but there might not be liquidity for a certain pair, or something might be new, it might not be instantly liquid. And it's just a really bad way in order to build out these systems. The much better way to build out the system, which has been the XRP ledger's vision from the start, is, hey, you don't need to have liquidity between all these different things and each other. If everything is liquid to XRP, then everything is thus liquid to one another. You just have to make things liquid to XRP. And the XRP ledger's native functionality through pathfinding is to use XRP as the liquidity by default for the XRP ledger. So everything tokenized and issued on the XRP ledger, ultimately, the liquidity, most likely, flows through XRP. This means that if I was to tokenize trillions of dollars worth of bonds on the XRP ledger, does that instantly do anything for the price of XRP? No, it doesn't, because those bonds are just sitting there. But if we start having activity there, right? Financial institutions, people like, I don't know, Hidden Road, clearinghouses, starting to utilize that as the settlement mechanism for these trades, that's where things get really exciting. Because then you need an equal amount of value of XRP to essentially act as liquidity for each one of these pairs. If you don't have enough XRP, right, there's not enough XRP available, or there's too much volume, what has to happen in order to get more volume there? What has to happen to scale the liquidity? Well, the XRP ledger actually has a native mechanism to handle this, and this is the part people are going to like. The native mechanism for XRP to scale that liquidity is very simple. The price of XRP has to go up. The more volume, right, the more demand for XRP, the higher the token price needs to be to handle that liquidity. You can't have trillions of dollars of trading volume on the XRP ledger without ultimately having enough liquidity to handle that trading volume. And the native mechanism to handle that scale up in liquidity is simply for XRP's price to go up. Because say you needed to settle a $1 million transaction, you might not want to use 1 million XRP, or there might not be 1 million XRP for that transaction. But just in some super easy to understand example, not saying this is going to happen, but if each XRP was worth $1 million, then you would only need a single XRP. That frees up a lot more XRP to be used for other things. And the more there is less available XRP for each specific derivative pair, for each trade, for Ripple's cross-border payment system, for people to hold, for the ETF, the more the price of XRP needs to go up to handle the need for the XRP. This is one of the things I always talk about, and the reason why I'm so attracted to XRP versus other blockchain systems. You actually need XRP. The XRP ledger is a critical piece, or XRP is a critical piece to the XRP ledger to function. It's the liquidity. So it's not like any of these other blockchains where it's like, oh, here's this really cool system and then you can hold the token for fun. No, XRP has native demand in the XRP ledger system, which acts as this neutral, decentralized clearinghouse for this financial system being built. So this is why, for me, XRP is so appetizing in comparison to everything else. People always bring up Project A, Project B, Project C. Hey, these people are trying to do this, these people are trying to do that. It could be a brilliant system. But if I can't see a direct use case for the token, it's like, why am I holding this thing, right? For me, the application of the XRP ledger with Ripple's relationships in the TradFi world and with the TradFi's world willingness and desire to tokenize the financial system, these two things go hand in hand. And the last missing piece of the equation, is XRP a critical part of the equation? In my opinion, the answer is outstandingly yes. XRP is absolutely critical in making this entire thing work. And without it, you just have a recreation of the old financial system. So that's why I'm so biased towards XRP. It's one of the few projects out there where it's like, yes, this is the exact reason you need a token, because that token has infinitely scalable liquidity across all these different corridors and across all these different pairs. The XRP ledger can't function without it. It's an absolute necessity. And therefore, it builds this ecosystem where XRP is going to be in extremely high demand if Ripple and people using the XRP ledger can adopt it for this use case. I don't see another blockchain out there better positioned to capture this use case than Ripple. And I think these partnerships are just further proving that every single day. Guys, thank you so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed this update. And for now, Mickle out.